Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
There's the right way, the wrong way, and the petty way of doing things, and you live by that. The other side of the house won the race with Greg Sachs. And, I walked down to the trailer after the race and he's like, it's been good. I got to go. And it was different. I got to go. She goes, the guy said to tell you that it's Jack Roush and he needs to talk to you. And I said, oh, I'll be right in.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
You know, there was a time in Winston Cup garage when you couldn't swing a stick without hitting a Pemberton. How did your family first get involved in all of this?
Well, it's a long story, but nonetheless, other than, we're from upstate New York.
Yeah.
Our local racetrack was Albany-Saratoga Speedway in Malta, New York. And so it was built in the 60s, mid-60s. And we're become race fans. My mother and my grandmother took us to the first race up there, and, it was modified country. But you got hooked on that and made good friends. We had the local restaurant that a lot of the drivers came and ate at. And, as would happen, my good friends wound up being people like Jerry Cook, Pete Hamilton, Don McTavish, who worked around the corner at the L&R Speed Shop, and a host of greats, Rini Charland and Ron Narduzzi and things like that. But when the France family decided that to try to integrate the Grand National Series with the modifieds, and at the modified tracks up north, our local track happened to be on the schedule. So at that point in time, I was a big Richard Petty fan for whatever reason, because you didn't get to see much of the races on TV, but they'd show something on Wild World of Sports or something. So kind of like gravitated to that full body stuff. And when they came and they raced up north, they stayed at the motel across the street from a restaurant. Pete Hamilton was driving for him then. And so we had an inn, and, we were only 12, 13 years old at the time when we met the Pettys. And, it was just, I was impressed by the fact that there was mechanics that actually could go to work and make a living at race cars. And kept in touch. Had friends of mine that moved south, Steve Meal. We were friends since we were long before we could drive. And he moved down in the mid-'70s, and then I moved down in the late '70s to go to work at the Pettys as a mechanic, fabricator, whatever it could be. You did it as a hobby, and then the family just kind of followed suit.
Now, what's the hierarchy of the Pemberton siblings?
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Right, and Randy was 3 years younger than me. And then there was a 10-year gap, and then Ryan, and then another 3-year gap, and Roman was in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All boys? Did you have any
all
sisters?
Boys.
Really?
Good
Yeah.
race.
Okay.
Yeah. God bless my mother.
You grew up with Steve Meal. How did you guys first meet? And was he influential in making you come south?
Yeah. I mean, we met because of the short track, and he was a fan. He was in Colony, New York, down near Albany, and so we met just by either him being at my dad's restaurant or across the street at the L&R Speed Shop, or I think he was like a weekend warrior, and his dad helped Brian Ross, who was driving up there at the time, and Brian only lived like a mile down the street from us, and that's how we started. And we all had the bug, and he went away to college and for a couple of years, and then he got a job down south. I think was working at at DeWitt's or Benny Parsons at the time, and we always kept in touch. We're really, really great friends, and every time there was an opportunity, he would say, hey, maybe you can come do this or come do that, so.
Now, who got who into more trouble? Did you get him into trouble, or
I'll put it this way: we saved each other more times than not. It'll be equal. How's that? Yeah. We walked down a few rocky roads in our day.
Now, when you came down in, I think your first year was '79.
Yeah. February, right after Daytona in '79.
Okay, so right after Daytona.
Right after
so
Daytona.
You weren't there for the 500
No.
or Kyle?
No, and I was sitting in the grandstands and watched the Permatex race on that Saturday.
Okay. So you were there.
I was there, but I was
Okay.
there as my girlfriend at the time and I were coming back from vacation down in South Florida and stopped in to see the race on the way back.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
How much longer after that did you start?
Probably a month or so.
Did you already know that you were going to be working there?
It was in the works at the time, and
Right.
I think that Kyle did so well. I think that they kind of not fast-tracked it, but they knew they needed one or two more guys or something.
Petty Enterprises at the time had a little bit of a kiddie core, the Lollipop Gang. There's a picture in the paper, in Grand National Scene of all of you with your lollipops and everything. Who was in charge of those young bucks? Who kept them all pointed in the same direction?
Everything went through Richard.
Okay.
If it wasn't for him, it would be like herding cats, he was instrumental in teaching you the right way to do things, and as a mechanic, as road crew or whatever it happened to be. But he was a stickler for details, and he made you. He always, there's things that he told you, and that it's been a long time since I worked there, and him and I remain friends today. But there's things that he said during those times that pop into your mind when you're doing something, you know what I mean? And whether you're working on cars or anything, he was pretty wise and taught you the right way to do things.
What were Richard Petty's rules to life then? What are some of those things that pop into your
One of the, he always said when we had really nice race cars, beautiful race cars, and he always said, he's like, you're not going to win all the races, right? You're going to lose more than you win. But he said, you're going to have to, you got to look good, right? And you got to be the best looking car. Everybody wants to look at your car, and the attention to details on everything you did with those race cars. And he was a stickler for the detail, and it stuck with you. I was over there for dinner at the shop with all the old employees a couple weeks ago, the original ones, and and Kyle had the quote, and this is true: there's a right way, the wrong way, and the Petty way of doing things. Yeah. And you live by that.
Your first year down here, Richard wins the 500. You weren't working for him, but it was in the works, like you said. Then the team wins the championship. And, that's an awful lot of success very early in your career. Was it hard to live up to that kind of standard as the years went by?
It was. I think when it all happened, it's – and you didn't realize how hard it was. It happened, right? And it happened on the backs of the people that were there years before I came along. I was way down on the totem pole. And you appreciated it, but you appreciated it more 2 years after, 3 years after, you know what I mean? Because it was a lot of work, and influx of some new teams, and drivers that were pretty aggressive, and it was the light went on a year or 2 or 3 years in, and like, man, I hope that's not the last time I get to visit Victory Lane or championship or anything like that.
Dale Inman left the team after winning the 500 in 1981. What kind of fallout did that have back at the shop?
It was really best I can recall. It was kind of it wasn't doom and gloom, but it was like, golly, what went on? I mean, you needed Chief, you needed Dale, you needed Richard, all the, you had three people in there that helped balance everything out, And there was always differences of opinion. That goes on in any business, but it was, it was just a weird feeling, after spending 2-3 years with Dale, or 2.5 seasons or something, to have him not there anymore, right? And even so, for me personally, it was like, what's going to happen? How do teams adjust? What do they do? How do they fill in? And but it was a weird feeling.
When Dale left afterward, who was in charge?
It was mainly Chief and Richard, and they promoted people from within, kind of. Everybody had to elevate their game a little bit, I mean, and, in those days, there wasn't, the fabricators were also the road crew, which also the mechanics, you might have been a fabricator all winter long, and then when the summertime, season started, you rolled your toolbox across the driveway to the maintenance, we did the car maintenance and the setups and all of that. And then if you had issues, you'd go back and fab for a day or two, right? I mean, there couldn't have been 6 or 8 in the engine shop, engines and transmissions and gears, and 1 or 2 in the body shops, and 3 fabricators and a machinist. It wasn't a lot of people. We just did a lot of different things, So it was, everybody just kind of filled in a little bit here and there with one person down.
Right.
Now, from what I understand, you and Larry Pollard were co-crew chiefs
Right.
in
Yeah.
1983. What was the working dynamic like between the two of you?
It took a while for us to get used to each other, right? And, we got along great. He's from a whole different culture out west and, than up north. And I was up north and east, right? And we just kind of, come together during that time. And, it worked really well. I mean, we knocked it out as far as getting cars prepared. He did one half and I did the other half, and for maintenance and stuff like that, and on the road. I mean, it worked out. Looking back on it, I thought we worked well together, all things considered.
Who had the final say?
Richard.
Okay.
If you had different ideas or whatever, you know what I mean, he would, and I'm not saying that maybe he knew what Richard had told me or I knew what Richard had told him or anything like that. It was parallel paths, but it was fairly clear. But the final say was the king.
Charlotte, 1983, fall of the year.
Yeah.
All right, who knew what and when?
I didn't know. I knew. What do you want to talk about?
I think you know.
I knew about the tires. Didn't know about the engine. And I don't know what anybody else knew. That was one of those things that, when it was all over with, you just wished it went away. I mean, when I got back to my apartment in Greensboro, I mean, there's and I wish I could remember his name. There was some writer from the Charlotte Observer sitting on the doorstep of my apartment in Greensboro.
You got to be kidding me! I didn't know that.
And
It
wanted to talk about it. I said, I don't have anything to say. I don't know what what I mean. Hell, I couldn't get girls to come sit on the doorstep. I got a damn guy from Charlotte coming sitting on it. It was awful. It was, it was a different time in the entire industry back then with who did what.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a lot of cowboy stuff going on.
You had the tire, you had the big engine. How did you recover, though? Was there any particular time you all got together and said, look, we got to get past this, or anything like that?
It was an unwritten rule. You just going to go in and do what you had to do on the following Monday and go to work. You know, I mean, that's all there was to it. You know, I mean, we had won before that, and you know, it was crazy. It really was.
What'd you do in 1984?
1984. So during that 83 was the last. It was kind of a turning point. You know, the King was going to go drive for Hendrick, and that kind of didn't work out. And then we actually. I was going to go to work for Butch and Bob at Raymock, and Neil was leaving, going to juniors. So I had already set that up, and the King knew it. And
Well, the King was going to go drive for Butch.
we tested. I was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
We went and
Yeah.
tested
Yeah.
Daytona. We
Yeah.
took, we took the car that we built at Petty Enterprises. That eventually won the 200th race, but we took that car and we tested Daytona with it. Buddy Parrott was going to be the crew chief, and it was, and there was some things that just didn't go down like they should have, the deal fell apart before we got the season started, and so I stayed there, and then the King went and did the curb thing.
So you stayed at Raymock?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I stayed at Raymock that year.
How did you end up with DiGard in 1985?
That was a Gary Nelson deal for whatever reason, and he come by to see me, like it was a Martinsville race. I remember him, just saying, hey, want to talk to you about some stuff if you. I said okay, and so whatever, he called and. He had my phone number at wherever I was staying at the time, rented a place or whatnot, and he called. We sat down and talked, and at the time, Robert was there doing engines, and Gary was running the race team, and they were trying to expand the team and do 2-car team or a team and some R&D work and some other stuff like that, and so he actually was the one that reached out first to get me to come there and be Bobby's crew chief, and he would mentor me and things like that.
So Richard Petty is as old school an owner as it's possible to get, I would assume. But then Bill Gardner was one of the first new school.
Right.
Treated the team
Yeah.
solely as a business.
Yeah.
How much of a difference did you see in working for the two?
It was pretty dramatic because you had actually, Robert was really the sounding board and the guy you would go to on stuff. It wasn't the owners. It wasn't, and Robert was the conduit there, right? And Gary, but mainly Robert just seemed like the more in charge of everything, and it was different because, in the earlier days, if people always said, you got to go to work for people that have to race for a living. They do the best job rather than people that have a regular business and then treat this as some sort of whatever, another side job or something. And and you got to feel that it was run very differently. There was, you had lawyers and accountants and bookkeepers sitting in the front office, instead of Richard's mother and his dad, and it was just a very, very different feeling.
What was it like working with Bobby? He knew a race car as well as anybody, and certainly wasn't afraid to speak his mind about it.
He was a piece of work. He was. I'm fortunate. I mean, I worked with over the years some great personalities, and I love Bobby Allison, and we got along good, and we got right dead in the middle of that DiGard thing that wasn't going very well. But he would push you to the nth degree to better, do more, do better, go out on a limb, try stuff, and almost to a detriment sometimes, right? You had a good race car, but you just went over the edge sometimes, and we had parts that failed and different things that you couldn't run. I mean, but he was really, really good, and you know, understanding his cars, and you know, him and Donnie both, and you know, it put the pressure on you. You know, he would walk in with parts from you know, Alabama and say, we need to have these on the car, and what can you do to do it? And you know, most of the time we did it, but not all the time. You didn't have time to do it. You know what I mean? But it was he challenged you for sure.
Legal parts from Alabama?
Yeah, there was in those days the rule book was really thin.
It was.
You know, it was. I mean, it was thin. And, you know, I've got one in my toolbox, an old one, and it's thin. And yeah, he would bring stuff in. Yeah, legal stuff.
All right. So Daytona that July in 1985. Take us through the whole deal with Gary and the test team and Greg Sacks winning, and then Bobby leaving.
Yeah,
that must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure, and I, not knowing all the finer details in there, but you know, I don't think Bobby was, you know, in those days, drivers didn't want a teammate.
Right. They didn't.
And in fairness, nobody really was successful with teammates early on, unless you were a Holman and you know, something like that. But and I think it just kind of rubbed them the wrong way, you know. And finally, it had us fill, and it didn't help. You know what I mean? We had engine trouble, and then they wound up winning the race. The other side of the house won the race with Greg Sacks, and you know, I walked down to the trailer after the race, and you know, and he's like, "It's been good. I gotta go." And it was different. I gotta go. He wasn't going to the airplane. He was going somewhere else. But you know, it was a tough race to run. We didn't have two complete pit crews, right? And then when we had issues, some of the guys were down there pitting Greg's car, and we come down pit road one time. We didn't have all the crew. We didn't have all the tire changers we needed. We didn't have. It was, and that was really. I'm not saying that was the end. It might have been before that, but that was.
So did you go down to Greg's pit as well? Or
No.
Okay, all right,
no.
just some of the crew.
Yeah.
What did Gary have going on with that car that Greg Sacks drove?
They had Robert's horsepower, and I think that they went off, and you know, that I think they had a better engineering outlook on things. You know, they were getting some help from some outside consulting and stuff like that. And if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the cars that Waddell had back in the day. It might have been the one that they ran so well with, and they wound up with it. So.
What was your reaction when Bobby left? Did you ever try to talk him out of it?
I wasn't old enough to talk him out of anything.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? I didn't have the experience. I was disappointed that it went down the way that it did. You know, and then that was the rest of the year was just tough. You know, then you had, you know, you ran Greg, and you had different guys in and out that you were looking at doing, and you know, it was tough.
You left DiGard early the next season. Was the writing on the wall with the direction that the team was heading, or was Raymock just the better option at that point?
What was tough for me is we were working 18, 20 hours a day.
Really?
And, yeah, and we, you know, I was living in Matthews, and the shop was over near the airport. And I would have to drive through Charlotte traffic to get there, which is fine. But when you're doing that at 5:30 in the morning, and you're not leaving home to go home until 2 in the next morning, and you'd go home and you'd take a shower, and you know, you'd lay down for a few minutes and you'd drive back. You know what I mean? There were times that we met for breakfast, leaving work at the Fork and Knife Diner up on Independence Boulevard, at 3 and 4 in the morning. You know what I mean? And going through that, it's like, man, I can't. Physically, I couldn't maintain that. And we had. I had a 10-year contract with him. And it was 18 months in or whatever it was, and maybe less than that. And I was like, I wasn't gonna go, raise Cain about anything, but I just talked to him and said, look, I can't keep doing this. You got to find another way to do it. But I'm not your guy. I can't do that. We were doing it. Thank God it was only 27, 8, 9 races, a year back then.
But then you
They
were testing.
killing it.
But then you were testing, I'm sure.
We were testing some, but you didn't. You didn't test a lot. You tested some.
Yeah.
All right.
How and when did Jack Roush enter the picture?
Paul Giltonen and was the guy there that put that together, and Paul was the guy that helped Gary with the car that Greg won the race with. Right? Paul was a Ford engineer, and so we met each other back then, and then and so we became friends. So I was at Raymont, and we had they were doing all they could to keep that team up and running. We had driver after driver after driver because couldn't get a full-time guy, right? So I'll never forget. I was so mad. I was home on a Saturday or something, and I was push mowing the yard, and we had a fairly big lot, and I had a really nice mower that was automatic, and you pushed it. I was so mad. I was mowing the whole yard and refused to engage the mower so it would do it for me, right? And I told Lisa, my wife, I said, don't bother me. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to do this, that, and the other. So she pops her head out the door, and she said, you got a phone call? And I said, I don't want to talk to anybody. Take a message. Okay. Goes back in. She comes out. She says, this guy is a friend of Paul's. He's, Paul wanted him to call you. I said, I'm not talking to anybody. And she goes back in. She comes out a few minutes later. She goes, the guy said to tell you that it's Jack Roush and he needs to talk to you. And I said, oh, I'll be right in. So, he called and said he'd like to get together. He's making some phone calls, and he was looking to start a cup team or whatever. And that was like in late July, maybe. He made the phone call, early August. And so I said, okay, figure it out and whatever. And so that's how it started. And we're going to meet him at the Holiday Inn. Had a meeting room in Greensboro, the one off of I-40, right there outside near the airport. And so I roll up there on whatever day it was, drive up from Matthews, and I roll in there, and there's Steve Meal, right? And he's there. He's like, what are you doing there? I said, Jack Roush. He goes, well, me too, right? So now here we are,
Yeah.
So Jack didn't know. Jack either didn't know or didn't pay attention to the fact that Steve and I knew each other. And so he's looking to hire, according to Jack, he was looking to hire one, but hired both of us. And then we just kind of divvied up the work, and Steve wound up being more the team manager, and I wound up being more the car guy, And so the meeting took place the week before the Bristol night race. And
in 87?
87.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think Dave Despain doing his Friday, whatever his shows were on TV, said that Jack Roush was going to go start a race team and whatever. And somehow, I don't know because I didn't watch much TV then, but somehow either Steve's name or my name was associated with whatever Dave said. So our owners, Bob Rahilly got ticked at me, and, I just went to talk to Jack, but, I needed something more stable, right? And I love Butch and Bob. They were good to me. And, when the worlds collided then, right? And so Monday I packed my stuff up, and I didn't go to work for a couple weeks. I think we started like the last week of August.